Morning, Commissioner Hubble. That again. Good morning, Commissioner Hubble.
Good morning, Janelle.
There we go. Thank you.
Mhm.
Morning, Jen.
Good morning.
Jen, can I have you say that one more time? We might need you to boost your audio up.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, BJ.
Good morning.
Thank you. We hear you well.
Excellent.
Good morning, Commissioner Eskridge. Good morning, Commissioner Wilson.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Commissioner Eskridge.
Good morning.
Morning, thank you. Good morning, Greg Freeze.
Good morning, Janelle.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Foster.
Good morning, Janelle.
Thank you.
Just FYI, I've got not great Wi-Fi here, so I'll be leaving my camera off to make sure I've got good connectivity.
Thank you for letting us know.
Okay, good morning, everybody. No, not it. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. We have a quorum. And let's see here. So call to order. I've done that. Welcome to all of our guests. And now we welcome Greg Freeze, who used to participate pretty much every meeting as representing City of Madison to see how what we were doing, is now going to be a commissioner. So welcome, Greg. Before we do the oath of office, can we go around and just introduce ourselves? Greg probably knows most of us. I'm Tom Hobble. I used to work in Fitchburg. I'm retired now, and I've been on the commission, as you know, for I think 30 some years or close to it. So who wants to go next?
I can go next. Hi, Greg. This is Beth Bookland. We had spoken on the phone once, and I've been a commissioner for about 3 years, and I'm retired since moving back to Madison, and happy to be a part of this great team.
I can jump in.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Go ahead.
you go. I'll go next.
Hey, Greg, Ezra Meyer. I'm a city appointee, as you know, and been on since 2010 when I was a county appointee, way back with Tom Hubble. But great to have you join us. Thanks.
Greg Freeze is Tom Wilson. I represent the towns in the district, as you know. I am so happy that you are on the commission. Welcome, 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 and thank you.
Hi, Greg. Sarah Eskridge. I used to be a Madison appointee, and now I'm a Cities and Villages Association appointee. Also very glad to have you join the commission.
Hi, Greg. This is Brad Murphy, and we have a long relationship as fellow city employees, and very happy to have you on the commission. Welcome.
Hey, Greg, this is, excuse me, this is Grant Foster, Alder with City of Madison. Great to have you on board.
Okay, I know Ken's gone, so I think that covered everybody. Okay, so we want to do the oath of office. Paul, are you going to administer the oath to Greg over the internet here?
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. So, and this isn't the first time we've done this virtually, so it's no problem. So, Greg, welcome. I'll ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, the undersigned Greg Fries of Madison, Wisconsin.
I, Greg Fries of Madison, Wisconsin.
Having been appointed as one of the commissioners of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District.
Having been appointed as one of the commissioners of the Madison Sewer District, Madison Metropolitan Sewer District.
Do hereby swear.
Do hereby swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of said office.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of said office.
To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. It is good to be here, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Well, welcome aboard, Greg. Okay, so now that you're a commission member, you're full-fledged to vote and participate in any discussion. Janelle, would you like to go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Yes. Well, welcome, Commissioner Fries, and good morning, commissioners, members of the public, and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. Number 1, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number 2, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, in general, please have your cameras on if possible. If you're experiencing technological challenges, feel free to turn them off. Number 4, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. And lastly, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. With that, let's have a great meeting, everyone, and welcome.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Michael, do you have any announcements?
President Hubble, I'll save my announcements for the CED update towards the end of the agenda.
Okay, then we have a welcome. Lisa Coleman's going to do a welcome for Kaylin Hockler, project engineer. I don't know if I pronounced the last name correctly, but.
Yep, Hacklower. Good morning. This is Lisa Coleman. I'm the Director of Engineering. I am delighted to introduce Kaylin. Oops, her name is spelled wrong. I'm sorry on the on the slide. It's Kaylin without the T. Sorry about that, Kaylin. And we love it when we can hire our intern. So she may look familiar to you. You may recognize her face from being introduced previously. Because Kaylin was our O&M intern this past summer, and she was here also in the fall working for us virtually, and she did an awesome job for us. So we're really happy to have her full time. She did well while she was an intern. She did have the experience of being splashed in the face with wastewater, and she also had her hands in sludge, and she still came back. So, so that's a good sign for Kaylin. She hails from Kenosha, Wisconsin. She graduated just this past December from the University of Wisconsin Platteville, and she's recently moved to Middleton. Also, she just returned from a cruise to finally celebrate her graduation and went on a lovely cruise, sounds like, to the Bahamas. So that sounded pretty good to me about this time of year. And, you know, I was talking with Kaylin and was talking to her about what she enjoys doing in her spare time. And she kind of looked at me blankly. And I remembered, you know, oh yeah, you know, students don't have spare time. So, you know, she hasn't really had a lot of spare time to do any hobbies or that kind of thing. So she's, you know, she's been working 2 jobs and being a student. So she's looking forward to having some spare time. She does enjoy reading and she enjoys caring for plants. And, you know, she's looking forward to having a little bit more time to develop some hobbies. So we are thrilled to have Kaylin and happy to have her in the engineering department. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Welcome to a full-time permanent position, Kaylin. You must have enjoyed your work as an intern, or so you're going. Okay, so Marty, you're going to do a recognition of Carol Milkey's years of service to the district.
I'll handle that one, President Hubble. And
Okay.
I'm really honored to be able to congratulate Carol on her retirement. She has served district owner communities for 31 years as an analyst, quality assurance officer in the lab since 1992, and she's been the lab manager since 2016. Carol's has advanced the use of instrumentation in the lab. Things we take for granted now, things we continue to be used today, were things that she advanced. She was critical to advance our pollution prevention initiatives with mercury and chloride reductions, as well as in our adaptive management program with Yahara Winds. She was the first lab manager in the state to oversee our PFAS comprehensive testing program when we started our action plan in 2019, and also was among the first lab managers in the state to monitor influence sampling for with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services and the Centers for Disease Control for SARS and COVID-19. She has always pitched in, and she has been a valuable member of many committees, including the Wellness Committee and most recently, as well, the Employee Leadership Council, serving as a management representative. Those of you who have worked closely with Carol know that she is one of the most caring people to have as a colleague. She always puts others first, and she's a really good listener. And that's why I really enjoyed working with Carol, because of those wonderful qualities she had. And we just want to recognize her in her well-deserved retirement. And I know she'll be doing many things, but she'll be picking up some of the reading. She loves reading, and she'll be have more time to do reading, among other things. So let's congratulate Carol on her retirement.
Congratulations, Carol, on your retirement, and thank you for your years of service to the district, and enjoy your retirement. Okay, that will take us to appearances by the public. Do you have any members of the public that are here that would like to make a comment or say anything? Anybody from the public? Okay, I don't see any hands raising up on the Zoom screen, so we'll move on to consent calendar, where we have several items.
Commissioner Hubble, can I
yes.
jump in here real quick before you go through them?
Okay.
I want to just highlight our fourth quarter sewer charge report. And Janelle sent out the summary in a separate email yesterday afternoon. And, you know, I've been reporting that our revenues have been down, and I'm really pleased to report, when all things have wrapped up, that we've come in very close to our budget target on the revenue side of the equation. We're at 99.1% of what we thought in the budget, which is about $400,000 less than our budget of authority of 46.4 million. That's really, really good news. Todd is going to be, we have scheduled coming up here on February 23rd, where Todd is going to spend more time with the commission, really trying to unpack what happened in our revenues last year to give the commission a good sense. You know how good Todd is of showing flows and loadings and trends. That'll happen on February 23rd, not today. And so I can proceed, President Hubble, with the rest of the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I did see some of that information. Let's see. Okay, so we've got the approval of the minutes from our December 15th, 2022 meeting. Cash statement, capital fund. Then we have 4 sanitary sewer extension plans, all in the city of Madison. We have review of bids and award of contract to increase project costs for 21 treatment plant HVAC improvement. That's quite an increase. It's about a $500,000, if I remember right. Let's see. Review of proposal and award a contract for Microsoft licensing configuration product migration. Bids and award purchase for 2022 sludge stream injection. Award a contract for construction phase engineering services for pump station 4 rehabilitation. Authorization of increased total project cost for the engine generator control panel upgrades. Acceptance of work Grass Lake dike restoration, review of bids and award a contract for sodium hydroxide, and approval of 4th quarter 2022 sewer service charges. I think that information came out yesterday. Okay, any questions or on any of the items before we get a motion? Okay, I don't see any questions. So do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the 11 items?
Commissioner
Wilson.
Freeze, do you want the honors?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Sure, I will move consent, approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Greg Freeze. Do we have a second?
It's Wilson. I'll second that.
Okay, second by Commissioner Wilson. So all those in favor of approving the motion to approve the consent calendar by Commissioner Freeze, second by Commissioner Wilson, say aye.
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 And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay. That will take us to topics where we have the commissioner officer elections. Michael had suggested we put this on with a new member. So do we have, well, first of all, Michael had asked if I was willing to continue serving. I said I would, at least until the end of my term, which I think comes in September, and then we'll see what happens. So I don't remember what Ezra, and I know Brad, you kind of at one point said this was kind of a temporary thing you're filling in, but I don't know if you're willing to continue to serve or not. So
I would, unless somebody really wants to do it. I would also be happy to have somebody else do it. So, but I would be able, certainly be willing to continue.
Same goes for me in the vice president role, Tom, if that's the will of the commission.
Okay. Okay, so do we have any nominations?
I'll nominate Commissioner Hubble to be president, Commissioner Meyer to be vice president, and Commissioner Murphy to be secretary.
Okay, do we have a let's see, I can't remember how do we take we have the nomination. Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, then we'll vote. So all in favor of basically the current slate of candidates continuing in their terms, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? None? Okay, motion carries. Okay, thank you all,
Hey,
Ezra
Tom?
and Brad, for
Tom?
serving. Yes.
Before we move on from this agenda item, I just wanted to bring up, it looks like the staff recommendation in the CAR was really helpful to say it's time for us to have some more robust procedures about our governance practices and leadership ongoingly, because as you said, we've kind of done this on an ad hoc basis. I would just like to comment on that part of the ask today and say it makes sense to me to say we should have some procedures in commission policy, and we should look at what those are and how periodically we re-examine our terms. And I would appreciate staff taking the lead on providing us with some recommendations on that part of what was in the CAR.
Okay. Michael, you
Thank you, Commissioner Eskridge, for bringing that up. I was going to follow up on that as well. One thing I did a little differently this year is I have a resolution for the appointments, which also includes that second action that Commissioner Eskridge is referring to. So I know we just approved the slate of candidates, and what I would ask is that that we have another motion approving resolution 2023-1-12-13, appointing X, and then directing staff to include election procedures in future commission policy book updates. So.
Okay, so Sarah, you want to make that motion?
I would be happy to
approve?
make that motion to approve the resolution as drafted by staff in the commission.
Okay, do we have a second?
Happy to second that, Commissioner Meyer.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Eskridge, second by Commissioner Meyer to approve the resolution, approving the nominations, and then setting forth a more formal, getting together a more formal policy. Any comments or questions, discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, so that will take us to the study session, review of the CED performance, the review process, which we're going to be changing. So Sarah, are you going to lead this off? And then Michael can jump in.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hubble. So to kick off, we periodically come back to you all as a subcommittee on CED performance review to talk about the need, in our opinion, for some changes and updates to that process, and have been doing that really for a couple years now. And I will say it's been in some part a multi-year process because of the limited time resource of the subcommittee members who have been working on this. So I just want to thank Ezra and Grant and Beth, who have been working with me on this process for the past couple of years, for their extra time put into the process, but also really to the staff team who then jumped in to help us move a more robust process forward. So Michael and Mike and BJ, who will be speaking with you all today as our consultant on this process, it's been really helpful to have them take all of our feedback that included comments from the ELC, members of the E-team who have engaged in this process with us previously. We've been able to, as a subcommittee, incorporate some of that feedback, give it to the staff team, and ask them to put together a set of recommendations for process updates and next steps for managing CED performance review this year. And that's been incredibly helpful. So thanks to everybody who's participated in this process and been a part of providing some recommended updates to the process. I will also say that the subcommittee has given some preliminary feedback to these process updates, but today is just as much about continuing our feedback and conversation on these process updates as it is getting your feedback and update on updates to these processes that are being proposed, because this is an iterative process. So please don't consider what's being presented today as set in stone or as a recommendation that everybody has quote unquote signed off on. This is truly an opportunity for continued feedback and discussion with the broader commission, because we believe it's really important that this be a process that the commission is engaged in. The other kind of high level comments that I will add are that one of the things that continued to come up year after year in our CED review process were really broad comments about organizational performance that were important, but also had other places that they might fit better in terms of organizational performance review. So what you'll see here is us trying to kind of tease apart those things to say we need to have good organizational governance and performance monitoring, as well as ongoing in our role as the board for the CED, individual performance, coaching, monitoring, review, and that those things are obviously very related. But if we are doing a good job in our governance of organizational performance, as we've been updating and putting into place better practices around employee engagement monitoring, so on and so forth. Hopefully some of those pieces that had crept into the CED review process will be better fit in good organizational monitoring and governance. So with that high level background, I think I'm going to pass this over to BJ Rogers, who has helped us, the staff team, to craft the current proposal and walk us through what you all are thinking, what staff team has put forward for us, and then provide us with opportunity to discuss.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. It's always great to see the faces of the commission and attend a gathering of the sewage district enthusiasts. I have been working with a number of teams at the district for the last, actually, I think almost 2 years now, through an initial engagement with some of the operations staff and coaching and a number of other things. So I'm really thrilled to be here and to share some of the details of the process that we've been through on this piece of work. I'm going to share my screen. Sarah, can I get a thumbs up if you can see that? Just so I know. Great, thank you. So quick walkthrough. We'll move through this rather quickly so that there's some time for questions or discussion, and get going. So quick synopsis of what you'll see here. I'm going to give you just a very brief overview of the process that we've been through, our recommendations for the upcoming evaluative process for the CED, and then we'll have some times for question and answer. I should just note, not telling you something you don't know, but one of the most critical functions of any board or commission is the evaluation of the chief executive. And so, I think our effort has been to put together a process that will respect that obligation and make it as seamless and in some ways as painless in terms of at least the logistical and kind of labor involved in the process. So we started this process by identifying kind of what goals would drive our design, and I'll share those in just a minute. We created an initial draft, and by we I mean myself, Mike Lipsky from HR, and Michael as the CED. We brought that draft, and we created that initial draft, I should say, with a charge from the subcommittee. So we had some initial conversation with the subcommittee about what components were most critical in their eyes in terms of making this a functional and durable process that can be used year over year. We brought that draft to the subcommittee for their input. We received individual input from each of the members of the subcommittee, went back and made some edits and changes and updates based on that input. And now we're bringing it to you as the full commission for your consideration. I should have inserted a bit here in between commission presentation and commission vote, which is to say, to Sarah's point, that this is not etched yet. And so there is also a space in there that is that would be commission input, full commission input. And sorry, I'm not sure what's shaking with the slides here. Oh, I know what's happened. It's just leapt to my iPad for reasons unknown to me. So there you go. There's my own note to myself. Full commission input right there. So we'll work from this from these slides. So quickly around the intentions, we're looking to reduce the actual process of evaluating the CED. It was months this past year, and we're looking to condense that, and with acknowledgement that there's such a thing as a planning fallacy built into the human brain. I still think it's reasonable to think that this process, as outlined, could be completed in about 4 to 6 weeks, particularly if the planning is sufficient. So that was one intention, to remove subjectivity from the process and really try to build a system or a process that objectively evaluates the CED's performance in a way that is tied to goals and district priorities, to align future performance evaluation with focus item progress. So this past year, you all did the work of identifying what items the district would focus on as priorities in the coming year. And since the success of the district is the success of the CED and vice versa. It made sense in our minds to make sure there was alignment there. To provide an opportunity, as Sarah mentioned, for some ongoing or periodic progress check-ins so that it is a consistent conversation over the course of the year and not just one kind of historical annual reflection on what worked and what didn't. And then ultimately to either reduce pretty greatly or just eliminate altogether the need for a subcommittee. As Sarah referenced, some of the challenge was just getting the subcommittee together with busy schedules and other obligations. And so by either reducing the reliance on that group or just eliminating the need altogether, we thought we could build a process to do that. So let me just walk you very quickly through what the proposed process is. And you have a slightly more narrative version of this, I believe, that you all received in advance of today's meeting. So there are two primary actors in this, a review facilitator, which our proposal would be that for this coming year, I would play that role and then make a determination how you'd like to proceed moving forward, and the CED themselves in this initial part of the process with input solicited from key stakeholders and across the district. So the first component is the design, distribution, and analysis of questionnaires that would be distributed to with different content based on appropriate subject matter to the E-team, to the Employee Leadership Council, and to the Commission. So each of those groups will have an opportunity to provide both rating and narrative input relative to the CED's performance. That information would come directly to me as the facilitator. Following those questionnaires, I would conduct E-team interviews. So these would be one-on-one performance interviews with each of the members of the E-team. And that would be done post-questionnaire so that there's an opportunity for clarification or additional questions if they arise in the E-team surveys. Should note the proposal is that the surveys would be confidential, but not anonymous. So they would be masked in terms of their ultimate sharing with both the CED and the Commission, but they would be unmasked for the facilitator's purposes so that any further information that might be sparked by a questionnaire response would be able to be further discussed. From there, the CED, or really kind of concurrently, this can be happening at the same time, the CED will draft a self-assessment specific to the professional development goals that were established in the prior year, and noting progress on each of those goals, as well as a final year-end dashboard specific to each of the focus items, particularly the executive level focus items and the commission level focus items, and progress related to each of those items. In some cases, obviously, those things will be complete. In some cases, they may be very much in progress, and in other cases, depending on contextual changes, they could be there could be an interruption. But we'll talk a little bit more about how that will be monitored in real time in just a moment. Then on the facilitation side, there'll be a compilation of all the cumulative findings, so the questionnaires, the interviews, and to some extent consideration of the self-assessment. But the self-assessment will basically transfer to the Commission intact. That won't be sort of subject to editing on the facilitator's part. And then finally, a presentation of full findings to the full Commission. So this will include findings from the questionnaires, the interviews, up alongside the CED's submission of the draft self-assessment and the year-end dashboard. So that's the kind of comprehensive process for the annual evaluation. Obviously, it includes 4 distinct entities in the CED and the 3 teams most connected to the CED's performance, and we think represents a pretty robust way to gather information about performance over the course of the year. Let me cruise through these next couple of slides, and then we'll open for discussion. So there's also an opportunity through this process for more of an ongoing real-time conversation about not only CED performance, but about overall tie between CED performance and district success. So part of that is a quarterly focus item directed dashboard, a dashboard that would be presented to the commission at the end of each quarter or the beginning of the following quarter, that would articulate where the district is relative to progress on each of the focus items. Again, particularly related to executive level and commission level, but I think there are, Michael will be pretty comprehensive in his updates on each of the focus items, as well as some brief narrative or notes to provide additional context where necessary. So items that are at risk or items that are that will be achieved early, or for which perhaps the significance or the scope has changed as a result of any sort of changes in the landscape. There'll be an opportunity to provide some additional context there through narrative. And then on a monthly basis, Michael will be having, I think as he does anyway, discussion with the full commission on general focus item progress. So giving you both a monthly and a quarterly mechanism to stay on top of how each of the district priorities is being met or not over the course of that time. And of course, again, just one of the things that this does is provide an opportunity for adjustments to those focus items if and as needed, given an ever unpredictable world. So there's opportunity there. Let me get to some of the basic recommendations. So commission input and vote are immediate next steps. Not immediate necessarily in this meeting, but immediate, I think, by the end of the month. I think this is on your agenda for vote at the end of the month. The creation of a one-page process overview. This would be a document that could be shared really with anyone, with specific thought that if there are members of the district staff that are interested in more of the sort of stepwise process here for this evaluation, that they would have access to that. Some sharing of the information directly with district staff. So sharing with the ELC during a regularly scheduled ELC meeting. Ideally, Michael and Mike will be available for that meeting. And I think that may already be on the calendar. So by the time the commission has approved a process, they'll be able to do that. Adding an agenda item to an all plant meeting to share out the existence of a new process and to make those details available, not likely in that meeting, but through HR, primarily by way of this kind of one-page overview. In the 2022 process, which is to say the evaluation of the CED's performance for this year that's just closed, the recommendation is to sub focus items, which didn't exist prior to the end of this year, for the 2022 budget highlights, which were commission approved, and include the review of 2022 professional development action plan progress. So using the same steps of questionnaire, interview, compilation, self-assessment that are outlined for future, but really using this year as a validation process to validate that the steps that are included here are effective and will suit the commission's needs and the CED's development needs. And then the final recommendation would be to kick off the process at the start of February with looking at that 4 to 6 week window with completion by the middle of March. And some of those steps can be put in place to sort of support that timeline, even in advance of the full process approval, because it's just some of it's just scheduling logistics to make sure that that's in time. There are already drafts of both the commission and ELC surveys. Those have been shared, I believe, with the commission in the more narrative proposal that you received. So you can take a look at those. They're by no means finalized. But what you will see if you look at them is that they are directly tied to language from both focus items and the charge of each group. So the ELC, the Employee Leadership Council questionnaire is directly tied to the charge of the ELC, what their responsibilities and duties are, and how well they have been engaged in meeting those responsibilities by the CED. And I think that that's the overview of the process. So I'm happy to open up to questions or discussion, or to ask Michael or Mike if there's anything they'd like to add as folks that have been a member of the process. If neither of them have an ad, I see Commissioner Wilson has his hand raised, so we can go to him.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
BJ, before Tom, could you hide your screen just so we can see each other?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Weird format right now. Great. Thank you.
You really want to see me, Sarah? Come on. Okay, a couple questions. First comment is thank everybody so much for all the work on this. I mean, this certainly seems like the idea will streamline things, make it more efficient. Especially compressing the time frame, I think is a great idea, probably for us and for Michael. I do appreciate that. First question. So thank you. First question. I take it the proposal here has us like hiring, contracting for a facilitator to do this every year. There is not going to be anybody within our system that's going to do this. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. For this year, the proposal is that sort of as the existing consultant that I would facilitate, and having facilitated the process last year, that I would facilitate the process this year, and then it would be up to the commission. There was some discussion of the appropriateness of HR sort of playing a facilitated role in this, and because of the organizational structure, it does present something of a conflict for a direct report to be facilitating the evaluation process of their boss. I do think it is possible for if and when this process becomes fairly institutionalized. I do think it could be possible that it could be facilitated by one or two members of the commission, depending on their inclination and time and expertise. But yes, generally
like
speaking,
a personnel committee of our commission, something like that.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, effectively the subcommittee that has existed,
yes,
perhaps could do this if it were a much more defined process.
Right. Well, we call that the rockstar committee of our commission. So, okay. Well, maybe I call them that. So the other question is, I'm looking at, the gathering of information and the information that's going out for questionnaires, and I did not see anything about taking comments from our owner communities. And I just wondered if that was something that you talked about, that you considered, or not.
Yeah. So there was some conversation about external stakeholder, and I would say those communities are only loosely external, right? They are a part of your world.
Well, they do own us, basically.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. But I think and Michael or Mike can speak up, or members of the subcommittee can speak up if they think differently. I think in the end, this what it seems that owner communities would be in the best position to evaluate is overall district performance, not the specific performance of the CED. Whereas as representatives of those communities, you as commission members will have a very direct role in the evaluation of the CED. So I think if there is a desire for owner communities to be able to provide feedback on district performance, that seems highly appropriate, although would represent a different process in my mind. Whereas the direct evaluation of the performance of the CED, the way in which I think the owner communities are well represented in that process is that the Michael's performance evaluation or the CED's performance evaluation is tied so directly to focus item progress. So what we tried to do was design a process that accessed individuals who had the most direct line of sight into the CED's performance. And it's possible that I don't quite understand the owner community relationship well enough to know whether they may have good visibility into that performance, but that was kind of the thinking, is that there are these distinctions very related, right? The performance of the district, the performance of the CED, but that ultimately this evaluation is of an individual, not of not of the organization in total.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me make this comment, and then I will give up the floor, and other people can chat. So, to me, and I was an administrator and attorney for one of those owner communities, and as I know, I was a commissioner, but also as that chief administrative officer, Michael, is the face of MMSD to those communities. Most of the time we have contact with him. I mean, we do, in Westport, for instance, we would have had a lot of contact with Kurt or other people that are in the organization, but Michael's the face of that group. And we're always trying to maintain this contact with our owner communities. We've been trying to do that for years. We have outreach and everything else. And it seems to me that it's important for those communities that have had that chief officer, that chief contact with MMSD, that we know whether our CED is representing us commission-wise well. And because of that, it could be a simple questionnaire. Have you had contact or communication with the CED? And then ask a few questions about the performance. It seems to me that wouldn't be hard to take, and it would give us a good feedback as to how the various communities are thinking about not only how Michael's doing, but also, since he's the face of us, how we're doing. And so that's my comment on that. Otherwise, I looked at what was put together here, and I thought it was well done. I just saw that was missing, and then BJ, in your comments, it didn't show up again. So I thought I gotta say that. So I understand the facilitator, and I understand why we might want to hire somebody maybe to help us. For the first couple of years, it seems that maybe we can get our own hands on this through the commission, through a committee, but I understand that. But the second thing is, I really think we need to do something to get input from our communities, because I think it's vital to know how Michael's doing with them. And I can always ask the people I know, hey, what do you think about Muka? And they're gonna tell me, and I can pass that back to Michael. But it would be nice to get some of that input for our discussions about how he's doing. So there, I will go away now. Thank you.
Okay, Beth, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just want to follow up a little bit on what Tom was talking about around commission performance. And I do think that that's important to get, but I also think that's a separate part of this whole process. So, and I think that, getting input from owners and stakeholders is really important, but I also think that we should do that separately from this CED performance. So I do think that there's a role for that, but it should be a separate discussion, kind of apart from this. I also wanted to just say that I think BJ did a terrific job in putting together all of the input from the subcommittee. I think, you captured that really well. Just have a couple other comments from that. I think that HR, we touched on that a little bit, should have a role in working with the facilitator. So, and I think we need to clarify that, because I see with time, HR taking on a larger role. I understand that there is sort of a conflict of interest, but I think we can work through some of that by clarifying a role for HR starting right now and working through that. I also think that there should be periodic, and maybe it's every 5 years, every few years, to get input from the entire district, all the employees, a survey, general survey going out, so to just get broad input. So I think that that should be part of And then the other thing that I wanted just to touch on is that the role in creating and developing the dashboard. So I know that the CED, Michael would have a big role in that, but I also think that the commission and HR should also be involved in that. So we need to kind of clarify that. And I think as we work through this process in February, we'll work out some of the kinks in that, but I do think that we'll need to clarify the role of that, developing and providing input on that dashboard as we move ahead. So those are my comments, and I'm gonna turn it over to everybody else. Thank you.
If I could just respond specifically to, I think, to your second point, Commissioner Bookman, I think that I agree. I think that an opportunity for full staff feedback about organizational performance, district performance is critical. I think it's critical to be done way more frequently than once every 5 years. And I think there's a plan for that. And that plan is through an employee engagement survey. A well-done engagement survey leaves room for additional questions that also speak to general employee satisfaction, distinctly different from engagement, as well as some of the other components of employee perception of performance across the, of leadership generally, of the district, frankly, of the commission. There's an opportunity for employees to do that. So I would see that not as, I would propose that is not a component of CED evaluation as much as it is an annual component of employee, kind of assessing employee engagement, connection, satisfaction, and perception of performance. And that information is used not only to drive action planning to create a great workplace, but also to inform focus items, to inform professional development goals. There are lots of that will be a very data rich process if and when done well. So I think that would address, I think, if I'm understanding your input correctly, that would address that sort of second component of your comments.
Yes, thank you. I think that would be good. And the commission should have at least some review of that final.
Sarah?
Thanks. So just a couple of follow-up comments. I think what we're starting to get at is what I was trying to say earlier, is the teasing apart of some of these various processes that need to happen ongoingly. So I echo what BJ just said about how we actually have, I was trying to pull up the budget here, whether we defined it as a focus item or not, but definitely we have a performance area around workforce development, and employee engagement is a key component of that, because we have recognized that we are not up to kind of industry standard of having an annual employee engagement survey, and that's why that's been a key to-do item. And that will be then a component of the regular dashboard on performance when we have those results. And to BJ's point, we can tease out different areas of focus items over time based on that data. And I think that will be really, really helpful for us, both from a CED performance monitoring perspective, but also from an organizational monitoring perspective. So that's really important. The other thing that we didn't mention, but we've talked a lot about as a subcommittee, is that we also didn't have kind of I'm not sure how to describe it, except like a red flag process for anonymous feedback to come in about really gross violations of any sort of policies and procedures, or the ability for staff to go kind of around traditional HR processes to give complaints on performance, both of the CED or other executive leadership in the district. And that process is also being created simultaneously to creating this process, because there was a recognition that, again, from just a good HR perspective, we need to have strong internal HR policies, but with that also the ability for people to, if they are not able to or comfortable sharing complaints through the traditional channels of HR or their management, have another option there. So that will exist, and that anything that came up there would come to the commission as appropriate on the timeline of that coming through. Like, it wouldn't need to wait until an annual CED review process, which again is just trying to incorporate some more best practices into our overall organizational monitoring. And that's where I'm a little bit torn personally on this conversation around how we get owner community feedback, because I resonate with what Tom said in some ways, that sometimes it's the executives in these owner communities or the people who Michael's working with in the owner communities that actually do have in some ways better visibility into CED performance than perhaps some of us as commissioners do. We have a very focused view into relationship with the commission, but not the broader view. So it makes sense to me to either have incorporated into the process that responsibility be placed on us as commission representatives of that owner community kind of explicitly, that we would go to our appointee bodies for that feedback either annually or every other year, or some sort of periodicity to that where we would know that that feedback is coming in, or have that incorporated into a questionnaire like we've done in the past. In the past, we've done that kind of every other year, or extended that opportunity to owner communities less frequently than every year in a survey. I think there's potentially some value to incorporating that over time, but to also recognize that in the process of creating our focus areas and updating our strategic plan annually, we should also be explicitly incorporating owner community feedback there. And that's the feedback from that, like, right, some of the metrics that we might see on a dashboard when it comes to something like public trust or owner community engagement, we might see that there have been 4 meetings with owner communities where feedback is solicited, and the key feedback items that came out of that need to be highlighted to the commission include blah, blah, blah. I just see that there will be better processes for getting that incorporated through the mechanisms that we're proposing here. But again, I find myself a little bit torn on how we also formalize that into the process for CED review, particularly for the piece that is specific to CED performance, as opposed to the organizational performance, where that feedback should be coming in honestly more regularly and through other channels than just the CED review process. So for now, I think those are my key pieces of feedback. And the other thing I echo that Beth said is that creation of the dashboard and questionnaires, I hope we can a little bit iterate on and get feedback specifically from commission members who would like to provide that feedback, particularly as we're developing the dashboard over time. I'm sure there will be tweaks to it as we produce it and go through first rounds of feedback on it.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I've got a few observations or comments or whatever, but I'd like to hear from anybody else that would care to weigh in before I kind of get into what I have to say.
Tom, I guess I had one or two quick things I was going to bring up. I was thinking of the outline that you presented, BJ, as being comprehensive of the entire process each year, which requires the loop back from one year to the next. And the thing that was missing there, I think I might have mentioned this in my comments after you came to the subcommittee, is we do need to make time and space for whoever it is that's going to work on creating the focus items for next year. And I didn't see that in your outline, but I think we just need to remember that, because that will take days and hours and time and elapsed time and all of that. And it's something we need in order to have a basis for the evaluation the second time, right? And then the next one after that, and the next one after that. So we just need to make sure to include that. And if we're going to formalize this in a process, make sure to put it in there. Maybe more importantly than that, really nitpicky, anal retentive point, is that we need the substance of that really matters. and it needs to plug into things like our budget, probably. We've always done that. We were using those items in the budget as a proxy for focus items this year because we were in a transitional process this last year. But I think the timing works out nicely. If we can do this in Q1, even lapping into Q2 a little bit is fine if it needs to, and that sets us up for being able to have things together in time for the budget process through the summer with a fall approval. So I think that's good, but I'm just a sucker for these details, and I want to point it out. And I think it's really important that these things sort of sequence together and flow like they need to. And the good news is it's not a problem. It's just, I think we're on track for it to work out the way it needs to, but I did feel compelled to bring it up. The other thing that sort of flows from that, but it is directly related to this year's process, is it's 2023 now. Do we have focus items that we will be evaluating when we look back on 2023, whenever we get to that, I guess in about a year, or not? I don't remember, because those would have had to have been created before 2023 starts, ideally, but where are we at on that?
Maybe I can jump in here, Commissioner Meyer. The commission approved 2023 focus items. So when we get to the review at the end of this year, that the evaluation will be based on those focus items that are in the 2023 budget and were approved by the commission. And then 2022, which is the year that just passed, we would use the goals that were in the budget. Page 4 of the budget outlines the 20-some goals, and those would be reported on using this process.
Thanks for that clarification, Michael. That's perfect.
Brad?
Yeah, generally, I think this looks really good. And having not seen a role for the committee in the process, I'm assuming the committee goes away. Am I correct in that? Committee members? Okay, sounds good. So I appreciate all the work that you've done over the last few years, and I mean, I think this looks good to me to at least give it a shot, and we'll make adjustments as we need to in the coming year, see how it works. I do believe it's a good idea to ask our owner communities for some reaction to how we're doing as a commission. And I think it should be focused not solely on Michael's role relating to those communities, but in general. And I don't know that it has to be formally built into Michael's review annually, but I do think it's important for us to periodically reach out to the owner communities and ask them how we're doing. And depending on that can be built into the review as we get input. So I guess that's my general reaction. And otherwise, I think it's good. I think it's worth giving it a shot. And I think the commission needs to be prepared to spend a lot more time on the review process than the commission as a whole has in the past, given that the committee that's been doing all the heavy lifting is essentially shifting that onto the entire commission, which is fine with me. I think it's a good process.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Sarah, and then Greg.
You can take Greg first. I've already commented.
Oops. Greg, do you want to go, and then we'll go back to Sarah?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yeah, thank you, Tom. So my only comment here was this does seem, at least for the, I've watched from the outside this going on, and obviously you guys would go into closed session and talk about these things and stuff, but I did see right from the outside that this took a long time and a lot of Sarah, yours and Ezra's and probably other people's time to put this together, right? And so I'm a fan of creating a more condensed and, I don't know, orderly maybe, or that maybe that's not a good word. I do see you nodding, Sarah, so maybe that's an okay word. But so I'm a fan of all that. I do agree with Tom that there should be some way to reach out to the executives of our member communities. So I don't necessarily mean to ask them specifically how Michael is doing. That would be a pretty difficult ask, but Michael really sets the agenda for the district, right? Where the district is going in the large sense. And so for me, I think it would be good to have a feedback from the member communities is, are we going where you want us to go, right? There's clearly things we have to do, right? We have to comply with our permits. We have to clean the water. Those are the have tos, right? If we're not doing that, we have a different problem. But there's also stuff that Michael is generally setting the course for the district in big ways, really, that has not been done in the past. And I don't mean that's a good thing, but I think it's good to have feedback from the member communities that they are aware. That would be great if they were aware, and that they are on board with that direction. So that's kind of my add-on to what Tom said. So thank you.
I would add just a couple of things in terms of feedback. The question that I had in terms of the process as it's been outlined was, is there a difference between this quarterly check-in as opposed to the monthly check-in? When you described those two check-ins, the monthly dashboard to me felt a little bit more organizationally focused, which really is like the focus items that are in the budget are very, how are we doing in terms of organizational performance? And we should be checking in on that as a commission on a month-by-month basis. The piece that maybe Ezra was starting to get at that I don't see as much in terms of the future process is, what's the professional development, evaluation, goals, success items, which are more, frankly, closed session, individual items? Is that part of the quarterly, check-in? That's incorporated for 2023's evaluation or 2022, because we had budget highlights plus the professional development action plan, but we don't have, when we just look at focus items going forward, we're missing that piece around professional development and what kind of you need to succeed, Michael, as our executive. And so that's a part that I think needs to be incorporated in more formally to be better understood how that piece fits into this process ongoingly and developed year over year in terms of outside of perhaps the budget process where we are working on focus items, we are explicitly asking for feedback from our owner communities. We're going through very formal processes around organizational performance because we've incorporated all that into our budget process, which I think is the right place for it. But separately, we need a place for the personal, professional development to fit into this moving forward.
Yeah, so just a couple of thoughts on that. One is just one distinction. It's my understanding that the dashboard itself would be quarterly, and the monthly would be just general progress updates, and not only in part only because a monthly dashboard is not always very useful, particularly in long-term projects. In terms of the professional development goals, I think the trick with those is always making sure the goal is clear enough as to be measurable, so that it's not Michael is friendlier or Michael is less friendly, right? Which is hard to gauge. It's things that are concrete enough that they can be measured or assessed over time. And so I think part of that is ensuring that the professional development goals that are set by Michael in partnership with the commission are in fact things that are easily assessed. And ultimately there's a tension, I think a healthy tension, between the distinction between Michael's performance and organizational performance, right? The best measure that the commission has, from my perspective, as both a former board member and a former chief executive, is to measure performance of the chief executive is the body, is the district meeting the goals and benchmarks that have been established as priority by the commission. If that is true, then ultimately those are the best proxy you have for, is the CED performing effectively? And then there's the mushy stuff, which is, do people like the CED? Do they trust the CED? Do they feel that he provides opportunity for engagement and for contribution and development? And my take on that would be that data is best collected in the engagement survey, where the types of questions and information that you can get about manager level is quite informative. So depending on the tool you use, you will have an opportunity to look at that data sliced by team, as long as a team is of substantial size. So because I believe the E team is 8 members, if you were to use a tool, say like the Gallup Q12, you would be able to see data specifically for that E team and their level of engagement and their feedback. And then you'd be able to see the next largest group, so E team and their direct reports, and so on and so on. So I think that the richest data about some of those, the things that sometimes feel a little bit squishier, will come through that process and provide some direct action planning for Michael as a manager of others, and for each of the managers throughout the organization. And then I think what this year provides is an opportunity to validate how useful or not useful assessment of professional development goals are, and then to be able to think as you approach the next assessment process at the beginning of 2023, how are we going to account for progress or lack thereof on each of the additional professional development goals. So I think there's a chance this year to validate how to do that well, and then to determine how those get integrated in future years. I don't know if that addresses what it was you were thinking of, Sarah.
It's helpful, and actually, just for members of the commission, I'm looking at the focus areas that we defined this year for CED and executive level focus areas. And just as a good reminder for us, we identified employee engagement as a key deliverable in 2023, including, getting an organizational development specialist, having the survey, interpreting the results, and then creating development plans out of those results. And so it is actually reflected in some ways in the focus items. I think the piece that I'm teasing apart is that there's also a duty for us as a board in some ways to be supportive of our CED, to make sure that from a professional development standpoint, our CED is getting the resources that they need and growing in their own professional capacities and goals, and supporting that. And that's a small piece of this, but it's also an important piece that I just want to make sure there's a room for and a conversation about as part of this process regularly.
Okay, I had a few comments or questions. I think when BJ began this, he talked about how the CED update is probably one of the most important aspects of the commission's role. And I want to touch on that a little bit. First is, I don't want to be seen as ceding too much of our authority to a facilitator. And so I like BJ's comment when he said that maybe at a certain point in time, the commission takes over the role as we get more comfortable with the whole process that we're doing here. And I do agree. I mean, I served on the old subcommittee, so it's very time consuming, very long. I don't think it served necessarily everybody's best interests. So I'm hoping the new process, which I want to thank you all for working on, but I think to me, that's kind of a key, that we're kind of doing this as a transition point, because I don't want to be seen as having the district authority being ceded to a commission or to a facilitator who's doing all the work, and that we may get missed in between. The second thing I wanted to say is I see kind of a Venn diagram of 3 things. Okay, and they overlap to a degree. I see the chief engineer director and his performance. I see the commission and its performance, and I see the district and its performance. And so I see it as a Venn diagram where parts of us overlap, parts of us don't. And I think we're starting to get things muddled in between here because, for example, when Tom brought up the owner communities giving input on Michael's performance, and others are saying, well, maybe it's not Michael, maybe it's the district, and so forth. So, we've got to sort that out. What do we do with that? Now, I would want to make the comment that I think our largest input that the commission receives from at least the Cities and Villages Association, I think Michael also does with the city of Madison, but he can let me know if he's not mistaken, is at budget time. And when it comes to reappointments, so the CED and I, when I'm up for a reappointment and sometimes when I'm not, have met with the Cities and Villages Association. And I think that's where we get, probably the most input from that group. It may be different with the town because they don't have that kind of executive committee like the cities and villages do. But Michael, I think, has also always typically met with the city of Madison. I don't know if it's necessarily the mayor, but one of the mayor's staff when it comes to budget process. So I guess I'm wondering, can't that be, is that part of that check-in process with them? I know it's a little different, but really when it gets down to it, if we're looking for the review of, how the commission's doing, that's when we hear about it. And we heard about it a few times from some of the initiatives that we're working on, particularly with the budget. I mean, we're all aware of the angst that some of the communities had over the budget last year. So that's when we typically hear about it. And also, every community, I'm not saying, what I want to say is Madison and the cities and villages every year have a review of their commission appointees. Now, for the towns, obviously with Tom, it's once every 3 years. But with the rotating cycle of who's up, it's kind of like an election, right? If they're not happy, they can change you. So, and that consequently is also at the same time as the budget. So I guess what I'm wondering here is that's our check-in point with the city of Madison and the cities and villages, and we have to think of a check-in point with the towns. And the towns are, I don't know if they have a kind of an annual meeting, they probably do. But you have a smaller group because not all the towns are associated with the commission or served by the commission, very small number. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But what I want to get back to is that Venn diagram is, we have a number of things that were going on and we've been discussing the CED performance, the commission performance, and the district performance. And while they're all related together in that Venn diagram, when it comes down to it, each performance is measured separately, right? Michael may be tied somewhat to the district commission and the performance of the district, but I think there's more to his review than just how's the district doing, because I've seen too many operations that can still function and function pretty well, even though the chief executive officer has failings or is not up to snuff, because there's other aspects that roll in. So now, yes, are they hard to measure? Yes, but I think we have to figure out a way to keep the three separate, and I've heard a lot of the discussion that kind of integrates them. And so particularly so I guess my first thinking is that we have that whole owner community thing. And is that in September when we have commission appointments for 2 of the 3 organizations, and at the same time that we reach out, which is the same time we reach out in the budget. And so I think that might answer that question of the community input. And then are we talking Michael's performance, the district's performance, or the commission's performance with them, or all 3? And I think from our owner communities, it's really, they want to know how the district's performing. And if they have problems with the commission performance, obviously they can make changes to their appointees as they see fit. So anyway, that's kind of my observations, but I do like what BJ said, that this kind of transfers over to the commission, because I don't want, I'm just concerned that some people would say, well, wait, commission, you've delegated this all to a facilitator, you know, that somebody that's not even appointed by the district is doing what is one of your most important jobs. So Grant, you had your hand up, then Beth.
Tom, could I respond real quickly, just to a couple of quick thoughts?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just on the first, I should be clear. I don't see in this proposal, the facilitator's role is not at all evaluative. It is effectively researcher, right? It is the gatherer and the collator of data and information to be transferred to the commission for their ultimate analysis and action. So obviously every human carries their own, expertise, shortcomings, and biases, and I'm no different, and those will all come with me if I were to facilitate this upcoming process. But I would see there is no authority, as far as I'm concerned, in me or in my role in the process. The process is laid out, it's approved by the commission, and then the results of that process are ultimately analyzed and acted on by the commission. So I do think there is a world in which you could take this back on and facilitate the process as a commission, and I think that might be wise. But hopefully in the interim, you will be relatively safe from that criticism, since ultimately you will retain all authority over the information. And then the last, just relative, I think both Sarah, to your comments and to Tom's comments about the potential for an organization to succeed despite or in spite of a failing chief executive. If you hire a good enough E-team, that can definitely be possible, where they carry the organization to success. I think the places where you have opportunity for insight into those potential issues are both through that previously mentioned engagement survey, and the fact that both the surveys to the commission, ELC, and E-team, and the interview process with the E-team allow for pretty substantial narrative. So if there are concerns, if there are performance concerns outside of progress on defined priorities, focus items in your case, then there is space and opportunity for each of those key stakeholder groups, employee leadership, commission, and E-team, so direct reports, to provide some information. So hopefully there is intended space in this process to surface those things so that those can be presented to the commission as a part of the findings. So hopefully that will go some distance to address that potential shortcoming.
Okay, Grant, and then Beth.
Thank you. And thank you, BJ, for some of what you just shared. I wanted to say something similar. I think, Tom, in response to some of the concerns that you raised, I also have understood and think it's important that we're all understanding that the role of the facilitator is one of sort of data collection, kind of pulling together, but it's not my expectation that we are hiring someone to do the assessment of the CED performance for us. I think it is absolutely critical that it is done by the commission. The commission has to own it. And I think towards that end, I actually, I think it's a mistake to think about transitioning this back to a subcommittee in a couple of years. I get that if the process were sort of clear enough and straightforward enough that it could be possible, but quite frankly, if that were the case, I'd actually prefer that it still be handled by, in that case, someone from HR. And I acknowledge the potential conflict of interest of having someone who reports to the CED sort of doing this. But again, if what we're describing is sort of more of a technical process of facilitating information gathering in order to present to the commission, there really shouldn't be issues or opportunities for that kind of conflict to present. Although I very much support what we're recommending right now, which is a sort of an outside third party to do this, and I think it's an expense that's worth paying, and I would be really cautious to go back to a system where we have a subcommittee doing it. Number one, it's a huge time commitment, even in this abbreviated format. I think it is, and to have a group of folks doing it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it should be done by someone with professional expertise in this arena rather than a few of us from the commission, regardless of our skills and abilities. And I think it does set up more of a potential that it slides back into a position where the subcommittee is sort of now doing more than this collection of input to bring back to the commission. And I think it is really important that we have a more direct connection and that the full commission is really more involved than I think it has been in the past. So I just wanted to, I guess, reinforce all of that. And I guess one last point on this is I do think it's critical that that it is the commission that's selecting and hiring this person, or if it were to be a staff person in the future, that it was clear that that's the relationship, and that I think it was a bit of a misstep the last year where there was some confusion between sort of a coaching role and facilitating the review role. I think it is a mistake if Michael is seen to, or the CED is seen to sort of select the person that's going to do it. So I think that, I don't know if that was really laid out clearly, but I think that's kind of understood by everybody. But I think that is important just for overall kind of transparency and how it's perceived, that it should be the commission who's really in the driver's seat, is hiring or selecting somebody to do that. The information comes back to the commission, and at the end, it's very much the commission that's performing the evaluation and that's making decisions around it.
Beth?
I just wanted to add a little bit to what Grant was saying. First of all, I think that the BJ or a facilitator's role is exactly that, just to facilitate the transfer of information and not to be, have any input as far as personal input into the performance. I also would like to see HR taking on a role even from the beginning, participating in this process. I think it's important and to have HR transfer some of that responsibility over to HR even early on in the process. I also agree with Grant 100% that the facilitator, the BJ, would be accountable to the commission and not to the CED. So it's important that relationship is really clear, that any facilitator would be accountable to the commission. And I also want to comment on Tom, on your Venn diagram. I like that a lot. And I think that it makes it really clear that there are three separate components to this. There's the CED component, there's a commission component, and then there's the organizational district component. And those are three separate, but also related. And I think for each of those, I think that the performance of each of those has to be evaluated differently. So, for example, the commission is responsible for mainly the CED performance. The commission performance would be the owner communities evaluating how we as a commission are performing. And then for the organizational district, it would be a combination of I see the owners, I see the commission, and I see the CED kind of all playing that role. I'm sorry, did I hear somebody say something? Oh, that's basically my input. So thank you. This is a great discussion.
Okay. Anyone else have any other observations? I just want to weigh in a little bit. I understand that we do the final review, but when I was working, I always said perception is 99% of reality. So a lot of it comes down to how the whole process will be perceived. And as it goes on, and if people think, oh, well, you got this guy facilitating it, he can massage the data and information to a certain way. How do you know you're getting the correct data and all of that, when you're not doing the data collection yourself? But I'm willing we can try it and see how it works. And hopefully it will work well. But I just wanted to raise that point because 99% of reality is the way people perceive something. And once they perceive something some way, it's awfully hard to change. Okay, Beth, and then Mike Lipsky.
I'm sorry, my hand was still up. I'll put it down.
Okay, then Mike.
Thanks, Commission. Yes, Mike Lipsky, HR Manager. I really appreciate the conversation, and I just wanted to weigh in because there's been a lot of talk with regards to, how should HR be involved in this process? And as HR, I just want to make sure that I state my concerns about that in terms of if HR is going to be in the process, I think it needs to be a really clearly defined role because the process is laid out, has a large emphasis on E-team and gathering information from the E-team, doing interviews with the E-team to really evaluate Michael's performance. And Commissioner Hovell, just to your point about, a facilitator could come into this with bias, knowing that those are my peers and coworkers, but also knowing that then I would be in a position of having to take that information and present that to the commission about my boss. I feel very uncomfortable with regards to being asked to do a lot in that respect. I think that me being in the middle of that process is much more difficult and presents a greater risk of bias and concern than having a neutral outside facilitator who wouldn't be afraid to ask difficult questions. Whereas me being in the middle of all of that, I could bring my biases. If I'm having issues and conflicts with Michael, that could interfere with my ability to get information from my peers and coworkers. So I just wanted to bring that up as a caution that, I hear that there's comments that HR should take a greater role in this process, that if that is going to be the case, I think it really needs to be clearly defined what that means, what that looks like. I'm happy to play an intermediary role with the facilitator, but I would have really grave concerns if the greater role involves me collecting the information, me distilling that information, and me presenting that information to the commission. Thanks.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for sharing that because I think that's really important to state explicitly that challenge because it is a really important one. And I just wanted to layer on the importance of communication around these process updates and state here for everybody and advising Michael and Mike and BJ as you're communicating this out to the staff team. I think the importance when having this conversation is to reinforce that the reason the commission is spending so much time focused on improvements and process updates to the CED review process is because we understand that it is one of our most important roles as a commission. And we take that role very seriously and we want to do it better. And the fact that we will be much more regularly reviewing performance progress as an entire commission should be a huge vote of confidence and demonstration of that commitment for the staff team to see and feel and understand. It's not just that we put these items around employee engagement as focus areas, but we also are much more actively taking on a direct role of the commission in focusing on those things and getting the feedback that we need. So that is a really important thing to communicate, I believe. The other thing that just in the last little piece that you said, Mike, that was really actually helpful to me around what role HR could have is that kind of communications role, that sort of role between the facilitator and the commission. And that might be an appropriate role for HR, because it gets back to what Grant said around this perception of who does the facilitator work for, and making sure that that intermediary role could be played between the commission and the facilitator by HR, instead of relying on Michael to do that himself, because that not only puts the CED in a bit of an awkward position, but it also creates these potential perception issues. So I think going forward, just as I'm thinking out loud here, as part of this meeting, one of the roles that HR could play is being that intermediary for us as a commission with our selected facilitator in these processes, and being the one to help us communicate back and forth, provide feedback on survey development and communicating process updates, basically taking that work out of the chief engineer and director's hands, because by default, I think we've just had Michael doing it, but perhaps it makes sense to have HR and have Mike do that to help remove any perception issues and make sure that the accountabilities ultimately are between the facilitator as an information gatherer and the commission as a whole, as the group running this process and gathering the feedback ourselves. The other thing I was going to add is just, I think we've all provided a lot of really good feedback today. I am hopeful that when we come back to this item at our next meeting, we could have an updated process to move forward with for this next year, recognizing that that process will be a learning opportunity for us and we can continue to tweak it. But I hope that based on all of this feedback, we might be able to do what we were hoping to do, which is approve a process moving forward and do that as a next step, incorporating all of this really great feedback that people have provided today. It's been super helpful discussion.
Grant?
Thanks. I just wanted to say I think that was a good spur of the moment thought, Sarah, about that kind of the role that HR could play. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. So that I hope that's considered. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, while I think it would be a mistake to go back to a place where you've got a sort of a subcommittee taking a leading role in this work. I think particularly this next year, I mean, I think we're all acknowledging this is sort of something that's new. I think we're expecting to learn and continue to tweak it. That may be something that would be appropriate for a sort of future, subcommittee, a few members of the commission, I think, and we should probably think about getting that on as part of the plan already. Let's, after this is finished up over for this next year, maybe a couple folks could get together and just meet once or twice, review how it went, and maybe propose to the commission some tweaks to the process. So perhaps that's a role that a smaller group could play, but more focused on reevaluating the process rather than facilitating the process each year.
Brad?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Grant and Sarah said about HR's role in the process, and I think it's important that we not lose that and try to capture that in some way in the proposal that's before us. And I'm not quite sure how to do that, but maybe Mike Lipsky and BJ can give some thought to that and maybe incorporate that thinking into the formal proposal that comes back for our vote in a few weeks.
Okay. Ezra.
Tom, I'm just thinking about what kind of direction would be helpful to Michael, Mike, and BJ leaving today and then coming back, like Sarah suggests, next meeting with sort of the final proposal for us to vote on. The one thing that to my mind is hanging out there a little bit is this: several folks have raised an interest in adding in something around reaching out to the owner community executives, but I don't know if we have a sense of the consensus will of the group. I wonder if we just talk about that for a minute in order to get to either whichever direction the consensus lies, so that these guys will know whether to add that in or whether to leave that separately to be dealt with down the road, or to be left on the cutting room floor, or whatever it may be.
Well, I was going to bring that up, Ezra, is that was the one unresolved issue is, do we want to have the owner communities weigh in? Because I've heard different opinions. Some said owner communities, some said it should be the district performance. Some said Michael's performance. We want to have the owner communities weigh in on Michael's performance, or is the touch points, as I mentioned, at budget time and commission appointees sufficient or not? Tom, you're the one who brought it up first. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's pretty vital that we get that information, and I can tell you just a couple of examples. For instance, I understand that there is also, as Michael has said, as the face of the commission, that there is part of that's going to be commission performance. I think that our local officials can separate the two, but as an example, and I'm going to throw Tim Hurlitzka under the bus here a little bit. He is the manager, director of Wanakee Utilities, and Wanakee was one of the communities, along with several other cities and villages, that were not happy with some of our increases in the rates. And Michael reached out to Wanakee, went to Wanakee, talked with them, did a lot of things, and Tim Hurlitzka and I have known each other for years, just in our relationship, and and having some personal things in common. And he did not like the idea of the percentage of our rate increase, but he gave high kudos to Michael for coming out and the way he represented himself and what he did at those meetings, and the job that he did. And I've had those same conversations with Bob Whipperforth. I think Carolyn Crow would say the same thing. I think it's important that there is a distinguishing factor here between how we're doing as a commission and how Michael performs in his role, that we need to get that from the outside. And not everybody's going to have that contact, because they're not going to have any items that maybe come up that involve Michael. At the same time, those that do think it's important that we hear from them. They own us. They're the ones that, there was sort of a rebellion before. That's why we have this commission that's been created. So I think it's important to know that our CED is out there and doing a good job in representing us, and how he works with those owner communities, as opposed to how we're doing and how we're performing. That certainly is something we can take into account. But if we're talking about Michael's performance, I think it's really important that we get this. And I don't think it's hard to get. I think it's the questionnaire. We just need to add another questionnaire. So thanks again. I will be quiet.
Okay, Grant and Ezra.
Yeah, I think I agree with Tom, and I think I was also sort of on board with the concept that perhaps these sort of external stakeholders might have more relevant feedback on the sort of district's performance than the CED in particular. But also, particularly if there were a problem, and we're all kind of thinking about this right now with our current CED and are sort of making assumptions. Yeah, things are good. Everything's great. Imagine a different scenario. Imagine where we did have a real issue, and particularly an issue with some of those owner communities. It seems like if we don't have any formal opportunity to ask, we're not really giving opportunities for those things to be shared either. So I think at the end of the day, I would agree. I think we should incorporate that in. And maybe one thing we can do to help sort of highlight this distinction between district performance and CED performance, right? You don't have to say, we think the CED is doing a horrible job because y'all increased your rates. I think in that questionnaire, there could be differentiation. So we could use the CED annual performance as the moment in time when we're reaching out. And in that questionnaire, we could explicitly ask two different questions, or ask questions in these two domains. How are you feeling about the district's performance? Anything you want to share with us? And have you had any, individual interactions with the chief engineer, and anything you'd like to share about that? And I think that might help resolve some of this tension where we're acknowledging explicitly these are two different things, and we are welcoming your feedback on either or both. And maybe we only get feedback on the district. Maybe that doesn't flow into then the final CED performance evaluation, but it seems like it's the moment in time. I don't think we should have two different moments where we're doing that. And if we've already got a standardized process in place, we've got someone who's out there doing this work, this seems like a good opportunity to do that. And I think that we could all then rest more assured that there's not something lingering out there that we didn't hear because we didn't ask.
Ezra?
Thanks,
And then
Tom.
Brad?
Yeah, just agree, looping back with my substantive thoughts on this, I agree with where Tom Wilson and Grant are at. I think adding another question there, folding into the timing over the year, of this process, and asking very explicitly about both of those domains when we reach out to the owner communities. CED performance, we do want to ask about Michael, the face of the organization, who often interfaces with them, and we want to check in with them about district performance. Frankly, it's tickling around in my brain whether we want to ask about the third part of Tom Hovell's Venn diagram. How's the commission doing? Maybe there's an easy-ish way to put a question in about that. I'm not as compelled or as worried about that one as the other two. I think the other two are so important, but yeah, so I think we're kind of all resonating on a pretty similar frequency on this. Thank you.
Okay, Brad, you take your hand down, or you have anything to add?
No, I agree with
Okay,
the last three speakers. I think we should incorporate a mechanism to get some feedback.
okay. So what we'll have done is for the next meeting when we act on this, have a few things added in. First is the role of HR as an intermediary between the facilitator and the district commission, I should say. So the facilitator and the commission. That we add in that an after action review, that there'd be a group of commission members or the commission as a whole, or somebody or some group that would do an after action review of the performance evaluation. And that third, that another questionnaire be developed for owner communities. And I think at this point, we'll go, if we're tying Michael's performance to the district's performance, obviously the commission's performance tied to the district performance. So I think we just keep it rather simple and go with two parts to the owner, one, the CED, and the other, the district performance. And my feeling is on commission performance, they weigh in every time they make an appointment. So does that make sense to people? That those additional aspects be added to the flow chart, so to speak? Okay. See a lot of thumbs up, so I don't think we need to take a vote on that. Anybody have any other last observations or questions? And Michael, you understand what you need to pass up or down the food chain? Okay, good. Okay, my laptop went out here, so I gotta. Okay, so I think that ends the discussion. Thank you, everybody, and thanks to the BJ, Sarah, Grant, and I'm missing somebody. Oh, Beth, and Ezra, were you on that too? The panel, for all your hard work. So that will take us to item 4C, the review and proposals and award a contract with option to renew for engineering services for the inflow and infiltration reduction program. Jen, you gonna lead this off?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hubble. Good morning, commissioners. Just checking you can see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good.
Thanks.
Jen, would you mind boosting your volume for everyone, please?
Um, oops. I'll just talk louder. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, Commission. Jen Hurlbus, Collection System Engineer, and wanted to provide this opportunity since the I&I program is a 2023 focus item to give you kind of an update of where the program is at, and then obviously go through the award of contract for the next phase of engineering services. We'll just give a kind of an overview of the progress that we've made so far, and where the next scope of work is headed, and then get through the award of the contract. So we've been talking about inflow and infiltration, and started developing a program after we saw the impacts of the sanitary sewer system from stormwater flooding and high lake levels after that August 2018 large storm event. Inflow from stormwater flooding tends to get more attention, especially when we have a sharp increase in flows that exceeds the capacity of the system, and may create sanitary sewer overflows or basement backups. However, as that bottom left picture shows, there can be infiltration of groundwater through leaks in the deteriorating manholes and pipes, and that's occurring on a daily basis. And we also want to address that as part of the inflow and infiltration reduction program. So the commission accepted the plan for the program and an implementation schedule in April of 2021. And the plan identified work to be completed to move from development to implementation. We did a model update in 2021, and that was used for capacity and a cost-effective evaluation, which was the focus of the work completed in this past year. Additionally, an update on the I&I program was given at the June owner community meeting, and the advisory committee formed in 2020 has continued to meet throughout 2022 and is expected to continue on this year as well. So I wanted to kind of go through the results of that capacity and cost-effective evaluation. It was a lot of work in 2022 to get through all of that. When I last spoke to you last year, we kind of introduced the concept of what we were going to do. And it was looking at scenarios of kind of how our system responds under different conditions and looking at where there's capacity needs. And then taking that next level is how do you address those capacity needs and what might it cost to do those, address those capacity needs. So this is a generalized curve that, you know, to try to just kind of get at the concepts of what we were trying to do. So when we're looking at this, you're looking for that cost-effective point for I&I reduction. So the green curve represents the cost of transporting and treating wastewater. The x-axis is the amount of II removed from the system. So you're going from zero II removal on the far left to the, you know, a larger amount of I&I removal towards the right. So it's a little bit backwards. So I just wanted to make sure we kind of pointed that out. So when you're looking at the far left, there's no II removal. So you have the most flow to convey, thus the highest cost for transport and treat. So as I&I is removed from the system to the right, there's less flow to transport and treat. The cost decrease is because there are less capacity improvements required to convey the flow. The blue curve represents the cost of I&I control. The cost relationship is the opposite. On the far left, if no I&I is being removed, there's no investment or cost in II reduction. As you move to the right, more investment is being made on removing II. Adding the green line and the blue line together at points of II removal results in that total cost curve shown in brown. This general curve indicates that the knee of the curve, or the cost-effective point of II removal, is somewhere in the middle that includes both cost for capacity improvements to transport and treat, plus investment in II reduction. And that is what the analysis showed for our system. So we evaluated 5 scenarios because we were trying to compare existing conditions to future conditions. But in this case, in this graph, I'm only comparing the 3 future growth scenarios. So starting with the future growth scenario shown in the dark blue bars, we used 2040 flow projections that were provided from CARPSI. They were simulated through the hydraulic model to identify the capacity needs in the collection system and at the treatment plant that are primarily growth driven. So then if we build on that future growth condition, the next scenario shown by the light blue bars assumed that we had the future growth plus an increase in II by 30%, which we would expect due to aging infrastructure resulting in a leakier system. And the last scenario that was modeled took the future growth and that increase in II by 30%, but instead, the storm event modeled was increased from the 10-year event to the 25-year event. This was to do sensitivity analysis of really how vulnerable is the system to a larger storm event that's maybe not even that large, and based on kind of the expectations of the changes to storms due to climate change. So then if we took each scenario, we looked at 4 options for solutions that were evaluated. And those 4 sets of solutions are what you're seeing along the x-axis of this chart. So if we start with the 2 ends, this is again getting kind of back to that total cost, kind of ends up plotting your total cost curve. So if we look on the far left, capacity improvements only. So these costs represent the far left point of that total cost curve for each scenario. The assumption is that there's no II removal occurring as part of addressing the capacity needs. So we're spending capital improvement costs in order to transport and treat that flow. On the opposite end to the right, II reduction only as the solution. These represent kind of that far right point, that total cost curve. And the assumption is made that there are no capacity improvements would be made in the system. These would be capital costs for I&I reduction projects to reduce flows down to a level that could be conveyed in the existing system. So when you're looking at this, though, it's really unrealistic to expect that all capacity needs would be addressed through I&I reduction only. Not only does it come out as the most expensive solution in this high-level planning cost estimation, the work likely would not be done in time to address all the capacity needs that are being driven by growth. To compare, we looked at 2 sets of solutions that included both capacity improvements and I&I reduction as part of the solution. So looking at combo 1, there's more capacity improvements in that set of solutions, and that included the difference was that it included hydraulic upgrades at the treatment plant and for the effluent pumping and the force main discharge. Combo 2 assumed that more I&I reduction would need to occur in order to reduce the flows down to a level that would not require plant upgrades. So what insights can we take from this analysis? If looking at this, you kind of see that knee of the curve somewhere in the middle again. So the lowest overall cost is a combination of capacity improvements and I&I reduction. And I'd like to point out that even just if you look at just the future growth scenario with basically the same conditions of II, the total cost is lower using a combination of solutions. So this indicates that some II reduction in our system is cost effective compared to trying to build our way out of this problem. And the main takeaways, we saw from this is, especially comparing from the existing conditions to the future conditions, we're doing pretty well right now. So there is a need to address II. We did see that, there are some capacity needs, but we have time. And that time affords us, the ability to develop an incremental path. We can kind of build and learn as we go and adapt. And that approach, any approach actually that we're looking at for this program, really needs more flow monitoring. The high level analysis that we did, we're looking at large tributary areas. So we really need more data in order to allow us to focus that spending on those high impact areas, or where I&I reduction is most cost effective, versus if there's low II and you have a growth driven area, that is the capacity need. So there we would, maybe need to do upside, continue to do a capital improvement versus focusing on that I&I reduction project. So what's next for our program? As we did see in that cost-effective evaluation, we're really need to identify those high priority areas to target the most cost-effective solutions. We'll need more flow monitoring to do that. And this matches and aligns with the implementation plan that I presented last year. At this time, there's no changes to the schedule or the anticipated costs. When we started preparing the request for proposals and looking at this schedule and the activities, it really made sense for the next 3 years worth of work to be kind of grouped together. You're kind of learn as you go. And that starts with this flow monitoring plan this year. So when we put out the RFP, we did put it out for the engineering services for 2023 through 2025. And consulting firms were asked to provide qualifications for all scope of work anticipated over the 3-year period. However, we only asked for compensation proposals for the first year. We expect to learn a lot as we evaluate options and develop the flow monitoring program plan. And so reviewing that contract each year and negotiating that scope of services allows us to adapt as the program needs are still being identified. So just kind of briefly in the scope for 2023 to 2024, we're going to develop that flow monitoring program plan, look at potentially pilot studies and into 2024, start strategically expanding that sewer sensor network or the flow monitoring, and build in some data dashboards to try to implement some better data analytics for the program going forward. Our goal is to be able to advance more data-driven decisions for operations, maintenance, and capital improvement project optimization. And I don't want to forget, we are still asking the consultant to help us continue or to build and create technical and education resource materials to help our owner communities communicate out on the I&I program, and just try to help support that effort in our stakeholder involvement and public outreach. So our request for proposals was advertised in November, and we received 3 excellent proposals and as you can see, there was quite a few teams that proposed on this work. The selection committee did recommend and select HDR Engineering. Their proposal was a very detailed yet practical approach that we felt best met our current phases of work. I'll note the project manager, Marcus Bush, has direct utility management experience from his previous position at Met Council, leading their I&I program. So they really kind of were looking at that, how do you fit this program in and where does it cross functionality with other aspects of wastewater utility. And so the first year of the PROS contract will be $210,000. This is within the amount budgeted in 2023. for the program. And the contract is extendable up to 2 additional years to provide benefits for continuity of service. Reviewing the contract each year does allow us to adapt the scope of work, which will be updated and brought back to the commission to approve the 2024 and 2025 contract authorizations. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I would ask that the commission adopt the resolution awarding engineering services to HDR.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Very informative, particularly that first part is good to hear. The analysis that was accomplished. Anybody have any questions? I've got a couple, Jen. First of all, I saw that HDR has KL as a subconsultant. I know Kim Liddell, and they were mainly a traffic engineering firm. When I worked with them, had they branched out then to other things?
Their main role would be to help with field surveying. There's a field inspection of potential monitoring locations, and to help gather some of that information and provide.
Okay, so more of the survey. Got it. Okay, and then my other question revolves around kind of the whole our interceptors. Every year we undertake work on interceptors, and I've never really kept track of, but I wonder if it's worth doing. Interceptors are mainly done for capacity purposes compared to interceptors that are having so much I&I that they're failing. And I'm sure that we've got a combination of both, but as we move into times where we know that this past year we had some angst by some of our customer communities on their budget increases. Are we going to reach a point where we have a conflict between, do we do an interceptor that needs capacity improvements or an interceptor that has a lot of I&I? Now, the capacity improvement one, part of that cost goes back to the interceptor connection fee, but a good part of it probably wouldn't. Whereas one that's being mainly done because it's failing is probably pretty much on the district background. It's not subject to the interceptor connection fee. But I'm just wondering if there's a way that we need to start keeping track of these, because if it comes to a point of prioritizing, how do we prioritize it, right? And is there a certain amount of I&I we're willing to live with? If you're redoing an interceptor because it's failing and has a lot of I&I, that's obviously a big issue. But obviously everything's different with every storm. I just think that's kind of an area in which we need to start thinking about if we're ever posed with that question. Is you have to make it, a choice of one or the other, or other options would still probably be in part of that as well when it gets to the overall budget. But I just wanted to bring that up because in my own mind, I've not kept track of what we've done that's capacity versus interceptor, but it seems like a lot of them are capacity improvements, particularly in some of the more expensive ones along University Avenue and that.
Yeah, and what is interesting, and I kind of always say this, right, is an I&I is a failure in a pipe, but it's still in a sense functioning, right? So there's timely question. I'm in a process of taking our pipe condition database, converting it over into new upgraded better management system for us, and kind of fighting through that data QA/QC to roll into the collection system facility plan updates. So there's hopefully going to be some better progress on getting that kind of assessment of where we're at, and then an idea of to start prioritizing. And I think that's where it comes into this cost-effective analysis and solution. Is if you have an area that's high II and you notice that there's high II in that pipe and you don't need capacity improvements, then it's a much cheaper solution to line the pipe. You have methods, you don't need the bigger pipe. So we do have, in the past, we were trying to do lining projects on a very routine basis. I think some of those have shifted, been delayed. There's quite a few in the queue down in the next, or a few years out still. So they're on the list, but, you know, I think again, because of that, they can still somewhat function. The priority has maybe shifted in order to meet some of those capacity needs. And that's why you're having the sense, I think, that recently it seems like more of the projects have been more capacity driven versus condition. But yes, we continue to make progress on addressing both.
Yeah, well, thank you, because I think we have, and so it's unfortunate that we had to pass off on some of the insoucia form or whatever the lining projects.
Yeah. But I would like to have a better sense of kind of what is that backlog? What is that?
Right. Yep. So are you going to be doing on that old graph that we used to see for the asset management, you know, where they had that chart with the colors, the green to the red, or they stopped using that?
I believe that chart is still planned. I'll have to double check with Todd, I think, on to make sure but
okay. Yeah, I just haven't seen one of those charts recently, but the first asset manager was very big on using that graph as a method of easily showing what the situation is. Ezra?
Thanks, Jen. I too have a question that's sort of back on the first part of your presentation, the much bigger overview. Everything seems great with the resolution that's before us for a vote today. But I was thinking about probably tying together two things I saw in today's packet. We had the fourth quarter service charges, and I always take a glance at those and I kind of note, oh, I think it was one of the Vienna sewage districts is at 25% over budget for the quarter. That might be because of I&I, might be because of other things, but I&I probably plays a role. And it just made me think, you know, to the extent I&I is a part of that, that's real dollars for that customer community. And it made me wonder, to what extent does that cost penalty sort of drive them to want to partner and be a part of dealing with the I&I in their part of the system, which of course everybody's I&I ends up being our I&I eventually because of how the system works. So I just had that thought flowing through my head about, at least under our current billing process, we're revisiting whether we want to do it this same way going forward or not, of course, too. So all the variables are in flux at once, yay. But I just wondered about if you have thoughts about that. Because obviously I&I is in so many ways a partnership between us and our customer communities. So just thinking about it, curious to hear your reactions on that.
That is an interesting concept. And I noticed I&I kept being brought up during the rate studies, or what I was hearing from feedback from the advisory group on the rate study. So, you know, volume is only 30% of our service charges revenue, actually. So it's one that I think most people understand and feel that they're going to see that impact more. We actually had a pretty normal precipitation year this last year. The plants never even got above 62 MGD for a peak hourly flow. So we haven't seen a lot of significant I&I in the last few years. Lake levels are down, there's just been less rain. So we really aren't seeing it quite as much, which I know that sounds horrible for the person who's trying to, you know, implement an I program. But so I don't want to speak too much about the, you know, with the impact of service charges, because there's another group that's kind of leading that effort. But I think, you know, that's it. I guess I see Bill raising his hand, so he's probably trying to help me.
Yeah, I see Bill Walker has his hands up. One thing I want to be careful of is we're kind of getting into an area that's not on the agenda. So but Bill, why don't you go ahead? But I don't want to get into a full-blown discussion on service rate charges related to I&I, because that's not really the way the agenda was noticed. It was more on the action item for the resolution. But I mean, it's a good discussion. It's just, I think at some point, maybe we need to have, I don't know if we have a study session coming up or something that we could, or another meeting we could put it on. But Bill, why don't you go ahead? I don't want to prohibit you from kind of helping with the question, but I don't want to get into a full-blown debate on service charges and I&I at this point.
Right, and that's actually the point I wanted to make. There's a common misunderstanding about the incentive effects of our rate system. I won't go into it here, but I will say that internally, as part of the service charge review project that we started last year, we're developing a presentation to come back and report on our discussions with the financial subcommittee that we met with to report on their interests and concerns and some ideas we want to share with you. So this topic will come back in the context of that item sometime in the coming months.
Okay, thank you, Bill. That's okay with you, Ezra. I see you got your hand up or your thumb up. And Bill, you have anything else to add? No, you took your hand.
That's all.
Okay, yeah, you took that. Okay, so anybody else have any comments or questions, or before we get a motion to act on the resolution?
I'll move
Seeing
approval of
none?
the
Okay.
resolution, Tom.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by
I'll second it, Murphy.
Commissioner Murphy. So we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Murphy to approve the contract with for me.
It's just Beth in her background. Tom.
Oh, okay.
Beth's getting ready to vote.
Yeah, okay. So all those in favor say aye.
Sorry about that.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that will take us, that motion carries on the contract with the engineering services for I&I. So we'll move to the chief engineer and director's report. Michael?
Thank you, President Hubble. In the interest of time, I'm just going to report on one item and defer the other reports to the next meeting, which are not time sensitive. Commissioners, last week I sent a message to you, and I also sent a message to employees regarding Kay LeClaire, who previously did work for the district, and there was a story in the news. And I felt it was important to also make a public statement about that news. The district recently learned that Kay LeClaire, an individual we contract with to help us build community connections to water, has misrepresented themselves, their work, and the indigenous community. LeClaire was recommended to the district in 2020 to participate in our Creative Collaboration Advisors, which was an advisory group to identify potential projects for Shop One. LeClaire also served on the selection panels for the district's Artist Educator in Residence program for both 2022 and 2023. In no way does this fact change the integrity of the residence program or those who are selected to be residents. The district remains committed to working with the community to build connections around water and the essential role it plays for everyone. This will not change, and we intend to continue doing this even more. The district is one of many organizations that has been deceived by this individual, and as others who have been impacted have indicated, we will not consider future applications from LeClaire or further engage with them. And we further recognize the grave impact this deception and appropriation has on the indigenous community and its members, and we extend our heartfelt apologies to all those affected and the community as a whole. So, President Hubble, that's all I have in my CED update, and everything else can be deferred to the next meeting.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We'll move on to Paul with the regulatory and legal.
Yes, again, in the interest of time, I'll just note two things on the regulatory side. We're anticipating a bunch of PFAS legislation that has not yet been filed with the legislature, but we will continue to monitor that. Probably of more import for the district is the ongoing work with the anti-degradation rules committee. There is currently an economic impact analysis that is being reviewed. And once that's done, we're going to see some formal rules. And we're going to be watching those very closely for any potential impact that they may have either on our Badger Mill Creek issue or ongoing plant capacity issues. So that one we're going to be watching closely. The rest is relatively unchanged from last month.
Okay. Any questions for Paul on the regulatory and legal? Okay, if not, do you want to do the quorum and voting, Paul, or do you want to wait till?
That's completely up to you, President Hubble. I could do it now, but given that we're running late, I wouldn't have any problem to defer that to another.
Let's defer it. I didn't know what your intent was, but we can defer it. It really came up back when we were doing the budget and voting, and when we're a couple members short. We didn't have one member that was appointed, and so the question came up: what's the majority that we had to have, and type of majority, and how's it based on the 8 or the 9 or everything like that? So Paul's address that. So okay, future meeting schedules in the packet. The next January meeting's virtual, and then is it the first meeting in February that is in person?
President Hubble, I'm reevaluating all of the in-person meetings on the calendar, and that'll be updated for the next meeting.
Oh, okay. So we'll have a report at the next meeting more as to what we're expecting to be virtual or in person. Okay. So any future agenda topics? Other business? Tom?
I move we adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson. Second by?
Clark's not here.
Yeah, second by Commissioner Meyer to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank
You
you.
survived, Greg. Good job.
Thank you.